In that case, what would the result have been of you agreeing to settle at the mediation with Darren McCarty?
Objection calls for speculation and hearsay.
Overruled.
We would have received pennies on the dollar.
Mr. Chester, how much money did your client, the Mitte Foundation, invest with Nate Paul?
$3 million. Well, in these two projects, $3 million. There were some other projects as well.
Okay, but the projects that are at issue in the litigation we are here to talk about, the Mitte Foundation invested $3 million in charitable funds with Nate Paul, correct?
With Family Foundation funds, yes.
Yes, and when we say Family Foundation funds, those are funds that were committed by the family to the charity, true?
Yes.
Okay, and of those $3 million that were invested in this program with Nate Paul, it's really a private equity real estate deal, right?
It's a limited partnership.
Yeah, which we generally refer to as a private equity deal, right?
There's a slight nuance difference, but it's similar.
Yeah, it's very similar. You're in business litigation, correct?
Yes.
You've been in business litigation a long time, right?
Yes.
How many years?
Well, I've focused on commercial litigation about the last 10 years. Before that, I did other things.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I can harmonize this for everybody. The Mitte Foundation invested $3 million with Nate Paul, and they're going to get $23 million back, right?
Right. We invested in 2010, 2011. Yes, sir.
Right. AG's office was trying to foster a settlement between the parties, true?
They were trying to force a settlement on us.
When you say force, they can't force you to do anything, can they?
They were applying pressure. They did not, they weren't successful, but they tried.
They couldn't force you to do anything, could they?
I'll stand by my previous answer. They were trying, but they could not force us.
I appreciate your answer, but I need an answer to my question.
Okay.
The Office of the Attorney General could not force you to settle anything, true?
No, just pressure us.
So to make sure that I understand, there would be times you were at lunch but not seated at the table and eating with them.
That's correct.
How many times did that occur?
Dozen and a half.
And what about trips to Nate Paul's business? How many times do you recall that happening?
At least a half dozen.
Were you ever at Nate Paul's home?
No.
And did you ever see Nate Paul join Ken Paxton at the office?
Only once.
Is Nate Paul going to be considered a co-conspirator for the purpose of this line of questioning or not?
Your Honor, before you, if I could, a conspiracy requires an agreement. Can I take the witness on voir dire to establish there's never an agreement? A conspiracy at its heart requires an agreement between two parties and then acts in furtherance of the conspiracy. There's been no evidence whatsoever in this trial. There can be no evidence in this trial of any agreement between Nate Paul and Attorney General Paxton. This witness will confirm that. I would like to take him on voir dire to establish that, and we'll put an end to all this.
If I may clarify, it is not incumbent on the sponsoring witness to establish conspiracy. That is an obligation of the court or the presiding officer. This entire case has been about Nate Paul and Ken Paxton, and I understand why they don't want it in, but that goes to weight, not admissibility, and he can be crossed on these issues. This entire trial has been about Nate Paul and Ken Paxton.
Two questions, Your Honor, to establish with this young man that there's never an agreement. He never heard an agreement, no conspiracy, and we can quit talking about that. They can use this word all day long like they've been, but they cannot establish an agreement between Nate Paul and Ken Paxton.
He was stating that he would need to check with Nate on the cost of countertops and renovations to the cabinetry in the kitchen.
I'm going to be very specific. Did he have to check on the cost, or did he have to check on, did Mr. Wood seem to already understand what the cost would be?
Yes.
And what was the cost?
He mentioned the total of $20,000.
For what?
For the cabinetry and the countertops.
And what was Ken Paxton's response? That he wanted to do it or did not want to do it?
He stated that he would like to move forward.
And then what was said by Kevin Wood?
He said, I would check with Nate.
Did you relay that conversation to anyone?
I related to 2 individuals.
Were either of them people who worked above you at the Office of the Attorney General?
Yes.
Were you relaying the information to be salacious or for another reason?
I was seeking advice.
And who did you speak to?
I spoke to Mark Rylander and Blake Brickman.
What did Mark Rylander or Blake Brickman advise you to do?
Objection, hearsay.
Your Honor,
Sustained.
Okay. What did you do after speaking to Mark Rylander and Blake Brickman?
I spoke to General Paxton.
What did you say to Mr. General Paxton?
I asked him about the conversation that I'd overheard, and I stated that I walked away with a certain impression.
Let me pause you. With what impression?
I walked away with the impression that Nate Paul was involved in the renovations of General Paxton's home.
What concerns did you have about that?
Given the fact that we were working on several items related to Mr. Paul, it felt as though there might be an inappropriate relationship there.
Were you that clear with the general?
Yes.
And what happened?
He stated that he appreciated me bringing his concern to him, and that he then assured me that that was in fact not the case.
Did his explanation absolve all concerns?
No.
How did you feel at the conclusion of that conversation?
Still uneasy, but I never discussed it after that with him.
Did you ultimately put in your notice and quit?
I did resign, yes.
Was that on November 2nd, 2020?
If I recall correctly, yes.
Makes sense then that payments would stop, is that correct?
Yes,
And did they stop from the Office of the Attorney General?
they did.
Did they stop overall?
No.
What else were you provided?
I was continued to be provided a monthly stipend by the campaign.
Did you notify Ken Paxton's campaign that you were still receiving money and that you should not be?
No, I had let them know that I was leaving and to cut off my access to both the email and the calendar, and that I should cease receiving stipends.
When did you cease receiving stipends?
Not until the following year.
And what, if anything, did you do with that extra money that you had been provided?
Michelle Smith had sent me a W-2 with that amount. I contacted her, not understanding that I continued to be paid. I asked her what I should do with the money and if General Paxton would like it back. She reached out to General Paxton, who informed her to tell me to keep it. And I stated no problem, and I went ahead and donated the money back.
They told you to keep it and you donated it back?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
I didn't do the work.
How did you feel about receiving money from Ken Paxton's campaign after you ceased employment and in light of all the facts relevant today?
I have no reason to believe that it was with malicious intent. It might have been an innocent mistake.
I think maybe more specifically, I'm talking about your character. What made you return it?
I didn't put in the work, and I did not want any instance, I didn't want it to appear as though I might have any conflict of interest if anything like this ever came about.
Are you accusing, and I don't think you are, I just want to make it clear, because you were probably with General Paxton more than anyone else during that time frame that you were working for him, weren't you?
Yes.
I mean, I want to make it clear. I think that the senators know, but just for the public, sometimes you would be what's called a body man. You ever heard that term?
Yes, I've heard that term.
Yeah, and basically you're with your boss all the time until he releases you for the day.
That is correct.
So you would have been spending more time with General Paxton than anyone else, right?
Yes.
More so than even his wife, Angela.
Yes.
You're not accusing him of bribery, are you?
I'm not.
Let's be clear. The guy that spent more time, and that's you, Drew, with General Paxton than anyone else during the time frame that we're here to talk about is absolutely not accusing General Paxton of doing anything wrong at all, are you?
I'm not accusing anybody of anything, no.
Okay. You don't have any actual knowledge that Nate Paul ever did anything for General Paxton other than buy a lunch, isn't that right?
That is correct.
Let's be clear. The man that was with General Paxton more than anyone else is testifying under oath that you have no evidence, no knowledge that Nate Paul ever did anything for General Paxton other than buy a lunch. Isn't that true?
That is correct.